Hello and welcome back everyone. So I didn't know what to upload today, so I thought I'd make a top 10 quirks video. And these will be my personal 10 favorite quirks. It has nothing to do with power or anything like that, simply what I like the most. And I also won't be choosing anyone from class 1A because their quirks are way too mainstream in my opinion. Doesn't mean I don't like their quirks, but I want to give the other quirks in the series a bigger chance of landing on this list. But I will not be excluding everyone from the UA Academy, only the people from class 1A. Okay, so let's just get right into this list, shall we? Inaza. His quirk is the wind quirk. This quirk has a really strong effect in a big area, like we saw him use this quirk in order to eliminate 120 students in the provisional hero license exam, and he didn't actually damage any of the students, but he did hit the targets that were on the students that he had to hit, and that proves that he has this quirk that is capable of hitting a really big area but still with great precision. Like he can actually choose what to hit and how hard it's going to hit. It's not just this big wind gust that blows it all to shit. He can actually, control how powerful it's going to be and where it's going to hit more precisely and shit like that. And it also allows him to fly, so this quirk really interests me in the way that it can be used for many different things. It's not just attack, defense or whatever. It has very many uses, like many different types of uses. He can fly, which is interesting. He can use it to attack, but he can also use it to create barriers and stuff like that, as we saw him use against Gang Orca. He kind of like contained Gang Orca in this big barrier of wind, kind of like a tornado thing, except a little bit smaller and shit like that. So he doesn't have to actually attack his opponent with this quirk. He can use it to keep them in one place while maybe someone else on his team does whatever else needs to be done and stuff like that. So his quirk is a very creative one, which also brings me up to the idea that maybe he can do more creative things with it, like maybe even create tornadoes and stuff like that, like full-scale tornadoes, but obviously manually controlled, so they would do what he wants them to do and stuff, which I find very interesting. And I hope we get to see more of this quirk in the future of My Hero Academia. So far we've only seen a little bit of it. Transformation by Toga. This quirk has a balance, which is good for copy related quirks. I'd say it requires the user to ingest a certain amount of the person's blood before the appearance and voice can be copied. So obviously it has various uses because of this. One is infiltration, obviously, but you can easily use this for other things as well. I mean, not necessarily anything important, and arguably many of the things you can do are borderline evil. You can, for example, frame someone for a crime. You can hide in plain sight using a different face, obviously, and stuff like that. So I really like the way this quirk works, but I'm sure it can be used for more than just evil things. I mean, I can't really think of any right now, but there must be something good about this quirk, right? However, the person who has this quirk, Toga, she's a bad guy, let's face it. She's one of the villain characters in this series, and she uses it mostly for, I guess you could say it's a mixture of infiltration and just hiding in plain sight. She wants to find out more about people or get the sample of someone's blood. She just goes in there without anyone knowing it's actually her, and she does it her own way, which I find quite nice. Obviously she has more than just a quirk to rely on, but the quirk itself is actually very good for this, even though it's not really combat related or anything like that. It just copies her appearance, and she also copies the voice of the person that she has copied. So yeah, no one will actually be suspicious unless your personality or the things you do are very strange, because obviously the people around you will be very familiar with how you act and behave and things like that. So if you suddenly start to act up strangely, they're probably gonna suspect something's up, but they probably wouldn't guess that you were someone else using that said person's face, but who knows. So yeah, I really like this quirk, as I said, because of how it can be used for various things, even though all of these things are in one way or another related to infiltrations or hiding. It's not really about fighting or defense or anything like that. Overhaul by Chisaki. This quirk can be used for both good and bad. This much is confirmed. He uses this quirk to disassemble and reassemble somebody's body, for example, in order to heal physical defects or other problems with the body that we don't really know how extensively it works, but we do know it works in order to repair someone's body if it's broken. So if you've lost an arm, he can use his quirk in order to disassemble it and then reassemble it back, and that arm will actually be back, which I find really interesting. But it can also be used to do really bad things, like disassemble somebody without choosing to reassemble them again, leaving their body in pieces, resulting in them dying, of course, which is obviously bad. And this is kind of how the guy who actually wields this quirk uses it. He's not really a good guy. He does not consider himself to be a villain, more like a mafia member, I guess you could say, because I believe they're like part of what used to be the Yakuza. So yeah, they're not really about bringing down the hero society. That's not really what they're for, at least not as far as I'm aware. We don't really know their true goals yet, because the arc which this guy appeared in is very recent, so we can't really tell for sure yet. But anyway, this quirk, it does not only apply to living people, so you can theoretically repair anything or destroy anything if there is a need for it, which can of course be used for both good and bad. Let's just say that you were to have a building, right? You can destroy that building with this quirk, and you can also like repair an already existing building if it's like about to go down. Like let's say a building has been up for a number of years and it's about to just go down any minute. This quirk could probably like disassemble it and then reassemble it into its formal glory, which is quite interesting. So this quirk can have some really good uses when you think about it. Ryukyo's Dragonizing quirk. It allows you to turn into a dragon. Do I really need to say more? Well, she doesn't turn into a full-blown dragon, but her body goes into some kind of a mid-stage between a dragon and a human, and obviously this elevates her attributes like strength, toughness, and probably stronger senses as well. Now it's also possible that she gains the whatever attributes dragon scales have, so maybe she's heat resistant and stuff like that, but from what we've seen, it really does elevate her strength, as she was able to stop some really buff guy. Like she stopped him cold. There was no resistance whatsoever. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, I guess I really have a thing for dragons, so that's really why I like this quirk. There's not really any feat that the user with this quirk has done that stands out. It's just more about how the quirks work, you know, what it does. And I mean, I guess you could probably breathe fire and fly as well. I mean, we haven't seen that, but I wouldn't be surprised. But I would not be surprised if we get to see that later on in the series, because the quirk has potential, let's face it. If it is as creative as, you know, a dragon. Because a dragon can do a lot of things in many like fairy tales and stuff like that. So if this dragon quirk has all of those attributes, that would be really cool to see. And if that's the case, then I will like this quirk even more than I already do. All for One by All for One. Amazing quirk in its own right, allows for multiple quirks and even to use all of these quirks together. Like you can actually stack them and create combinations attack, as we saw All for One use with his quirk. So you can really create some really different and powerful attacks, and obviously since not all quirks are based on attacking, if you're a good guy you could probably use this in a good way, like stack defensive quirks, you know, quirks that give other people some benefit and stuff like that. So it would really be interesting to see something like that. I mean, we're never gonna see it because this guy happens to be a bad guy, of course, and he's in prison and all that, but it would still be very interesting to see, even if it wasn't canon. Now this quirk probably raises the hunger for even more quirks. Like if you know that you can get more quirks by taking other people's quirk, then you would probably get some sort of hunger inside of you that makes you want to take more quirks than you already do, because we humans, we're really greedy, right? So if that applies when it comes to quirks, if you know you can have even more quirks, you're obviously going to try and get those quirks. I mean, that's just how we humans work. So yeah, basically he can take quirks away from others and also distribute quirks that it's in his arsenal to other people. And I think this is quite interesting because in theory he could use this in order to give people who are quirkless quirks. I mean, I wouldn't exactly expect this to be one of the things that would happen even if this quirk was given to someone who's a good guy, but let's say it were. It would really, you know, remove that gap between who's quirkless and who has a good quirk. I really think that would be a nice touch. Obviously, like I said, it's not gonna happen, but just to think about it and discuss about it is quite interesting. Fire by Dabi. Now, I really like fire abilities in anime and manga, and that's kind of why I chose this. That's really all I can say. I really like fire related powers. Like originally when I watched Fairy Tail, I was really into Natsu's fire abilities and stuff like that, so... But then the question comes, why did I pick this particular fire quirk when there are so many in My Hero Academia? Like we have Endeavor's fire quirk, we have Todoroki's fire side. Obviously I didn't choose Todoroki because he's part of class 1A, but why didn't I choose Endeavor? And the reason is because I really don't know how Endeavor's quirk works. It looks really weird because of how it like sits on his body and stuff like that. So I really don't know exactly how it works, and yeah, it just looks strange, and it looks kind of normal, you know. But Dabi's fire it's black, so you kind of get his feeling that it's more ominous and probably has a different effect in some way. Like we don't really know any details about this fire quirk other than he can, you know, he can summon it at will, kind of like any fire power in any series. But since it's black, I'm kind of getting this feeling that it has a different effect. It doesn't just burn. Maybe it induces more pain, or maybe it burns at a different temperature, burns faster. I don't even know. But yeah, that's kind of why I picked this quirk, because it stands out from the other fire quirks in this series. It is black, and the others, they just have normal fire looking quirks, but this is, yeah, so it's black, so why not, right? Copy quirk by Monomakh. He can use someone else's quirk for 5 minutes as long as you physically touch the person who owns it. So yeah, as we saw in the anime recently, he did use this quirk on Bakugo and also Kirishima, I believe, as he used his quirk against them. Like he used Kirishima's quirk to deflect some attack, and then he obviously, I think he touched Bakugo in order to create some sort of explosion effect back right at them during the cavalry battle. So it would be really interesting to see just how he can use this at its full potential at some point in this series. We do know that he can stack these quirks, so that's also something that's really cool about the quirk, that he can actually, well, he can't stack them like use them together, but he can kind of have more than one at a time, as long as he only uses one at a time, because we know he can actually touch like 4 different people and get their quirks, but as long as he only uses one quirk, that's the limit. He can't like use 2 at a time, but he can have them saved up as long as the time limit hasn't run out. And I really like the 5-minute limit of this quirk. It makes it less overpowered, but still very flexible, because if it had an unlimited time, that would kinda make him even more broken than All for One almost. Well, not exactly more broken, because All for One can stack them and all of that. It's very similar to All for One when you think about it. Like he can copy quirks and use them, but the difference is that Monomakh's quirk is time based. It's a 5-minute limit, and yeah, he can only use one at a time. He can't stack them. So that's kind of why I like Monomakh's quirk more than All for One, because it has this kind of limit. You know where the limit goes. You don't have to think, you know, okay, but is it broken or isn't it broken? Because it's not broken, really, is it? However, All for One's quirk is really broken in the way it works, and since he's one of the main antagonists in the series, I'd say it's okay, but Monomakh isn't, so yeah, let's not give him a broken quirk. And Horikoshi didn't, so I'm glad about that. Muscle Augmentation by Muscular. This ability gives the user a passive boost, as well as the ability to bring out extreme levels of offensive power as well as defensive power. I don't really know why exactly, but I love how the quirk works, like how it actually functions with the muscle fibers, because we have seen as the muscle fibers they just wrap around his body and all like that in order to create a shell that he can defend himself with, and obviously he can increase his muscle mass on his arms and shit like that to just make his attacks even stronger, and he can actually trap people's limbs within these muscle fibers, because we saw him do that with Izuku, as Izuku kind of stretched and he got stuck between those fibers. So those fibers are really strong, no kidding. Like, if you have this quirk, you may be beatable with this quirk, but because of its passive power-ups, like you get these elevated abilities like passively, it makes it really hard for anyone to actually kill you. I mean, they can defeat you, as I said, but to kill you is another question, because these fibers really give you a really high base level of stamina and defense. Orciness by Gang Orca. This is the quirk that makes your body kind of like an orca whale, like a killer whale. You become an orca pretty much, except with legs. I mean, that's just creativity at its finest. You gain strength as well as some other abilities that orcas have, which I find really nice. You even get like a screech ability that can like paralyze your opponents for some time. Obviously a limited amount of time, but yeah. One of the best things about this quirk, however, and this may sound strange to some people, but I really like how you also gain downsides of an orca whale. It's a sea animal, so you get really easily dehydrated. So if you have this, you may want to pack a bottle of water when you're out on a mission or whatever. It creates a fine balance of fiction and realistic elements of these two. The mobility is really good since you can maneuver great on land, since you're a human, so you have legs and all of that, right? You still have your human attributes after all. But the Orca traits allows you to move really fast underwater as well. Let's say you're on a mission where you have to swim a lot. This quirk would be perfect for such a mission. Okay, we've reached the first spot on my list, and the quirk is Manifest by Tamaki. This quirk is just my all-time favorite, and the reason is because how simple yet strong it can be, because we've seen how powerful Tamaki's quirk is in this series, even though he only had a little amount of screen time. And you know, when you think about it, it's not a complicated quirk, it's really simple. Like, all he really does, he eats stuff and gets the qualities of these animals or things that he eats. But it doesn't only apply to animals, he can eat other things, as we've seen him eat rocks. Like, well, it was like a crystal from another person, which counts as a solid, so he gained a harder body because of this, which I really find interesting. At first I really thought, you know, it's gonna be related to just DNA, so it's only gonna work with living matter, but since he ate a crystal, which is not DNA by the way, that means he can eat a lot more than just food that's from animals. Like, he can eat pretty much anything. It's also confirmed that he can eat like plants, and that's another form of life, of course, so he can eat pretty much anything and he'll get the qualities of that. But one thing that I've seen some people suggest is that he can actually get the quirks of other people where he to eat their DNA, and I don't think this is the case, because first of all, he gains the general structure of whatever he eats. So like, if he eats a chicken, he's gonna get the general structure of what a chicken is made up of. He's not gonna get that particular chicken's structure, because if he did that, he'd get a roast chicken. He wouldn't get the qualities of a living chicken, which is what happens. He gets the quality of a living animal from whatever he eats. So he doesn't get, you know, that particular specimen that he eats. So if he were to eat, say, someone with a quirk, he wouldn't get that person's quirk, because that quirk is specific to that person. He would get the general human structure, which would mean maybe he would grow an arm or two, nothing more, nothing less. The last thing I want to talk about when it comes to this quirk is you can even stack different types of manifestations together, causing the quirk to gain even more power, protection, mobility, whatever it is that you need depending on the situation that you're in. If you've eaten two different animals, which gains, you know, defensive attributes, like let's say you've eaten a tortoise, you could potentially get the shell of that tortoise, and you can also, let's say if you then have eaten clams, you get the clam ability that we've seen Tamaki use before, which I find very cool. So yeah, he has one of the most creative quirks in this series, I'd say, despite how simple it is, because obviously it's gonna be mostly about food that he eats, but sometimes we're gonna see some other shit, like when we saw him eat Hojo's crystal, because that was the first time when we saw him eat something that wasn't a living thing. I mean, we've seen him eat sort of plant life in his flashback, and then we saw him eat animals numerous times in the series, of course. One of his signature things are, of course, like squid and all of that. I think his main bread and butter is eating whatever that soup is called, takoyaki or something like that. If someone knows exactly what it's called, you can correct me, but which include like clams, squid and all of that. So that's kind of the powers that he typically get, and chicken and shit like that. So yeah, I really hope we get to see some crazier things from Tamaki with this quirk later on. I'm sure we will, but I just hope that it blows my mind beyond what it already has, and this quirk is definitely worthy of being, you know, the top quirk on my list, because it more than deserves that spot, and it should be on everyone's top quirk spot, because this quirk is just phenomenal in every single way. Well, that was my top 10 favorite quirks. I hope you liked it. I'd love to know what your favorite quirks are, preferably with the same limitations as I use, but you don't have to do that if you don't want to anyway. So yeah, comment down below what you thought about this video, and as always, if you did, please like this video if you enjoyed, and subscribe if you're new to my channel. This has been your favorite host, Perm, and I'll see you soon.